be a very close affair, I feel. We have Richard, who was so dominant in the heat stages against the #1 player in India, the fantastic Gukesh. And I have to say, I really don't know which way this match is going to go.
Yeah, this one is going to be very closely contested. And during the interview, Richard was a bit pessimistic about his chances. But in fact, he is the one leading in his encounter against Gukesh.
And let's just have a deep dive at the players. And Richard was a grandmaster at a very young age of 13. He's also been European Rapid champion. And look at that, he's been playing chess for a while because he's under 10 European champion, but clearly a very talented player. And we'll hear more about him now as well.
Gukesh is one mighty fine customer. Look at this. Became a grandmaster at the tender age of 12 years old. He also won the gold medal at the Olympiad for his individual board performance, and he's also been the 3rd youngest grandmaster in the history of chess. And he now entered the top 10 of the world and actually is now India's #1 rated player. Let's hear more from Gukesh in his own words. That he's worked on creatively, and well, lights, camera, action, they are off, and it's the king's pawn that has been deployed. And there is the unusual system. Has been played before, but is very unusual at this level.
Yeah, so we don't often see White's bishop coming out, but nothing really seems to surprise Gukesh. He's such a hard worker. What amazes me about Gukesh is his maturity at this age. I remember when I was that age, I certainly wasn't as mature as this player. And we have an interesting position already where White has the 2 bishops, but if you look at White's pawns, they're maybe not ideal, and Black has more space in the center of the board. Richard, though, playing an aggressive move there, throwing the knight towards Gukesh's king.
And both players just seemingly reeling out those moves, indicating that they're both in their preparation. But this move has taken Gukesh by surprise. It's a bit of a weird and wonderful move because it's just the knight that is headed towards Black's king. And at first sight, it looks like it can be easily parried by developing the light square bishop or even kicking that knight away. So what is Richard's plan?
Well, there's a little trick here. Knight takes h7 is a big threat on the board, winning a pawn. So if Gukesh doesn't pay attention here, that knight move can go and take that pawn right on the right-hand side, followed by queen check. So this move, the move that Ivanka mentioned, our resident Nostradamus there, thank you, Ivanka.
Thank you.
Always predict the right moves, being the great player you are, stops that idea. Richard now using his rook. That's the advantage of having double pawns. It opens up more files for your rook, and the white rook is zoomy up the board, zooming towards a black pawn. Black doesn't defend that pawn, but kicks the knight away, and I expect that knight to centralize now. I kind of like what Rich has done here. I like the way he's played a rather different kind of opening. This is proper Richard, and this is why he's one of my favorite players to watch. You never know what to expect. You never know what openings he's going to play, but it's nearly always something imaginative, and he does centralize that knight, even though the computer maybe doesn't like that. The evaluation bar dropping a bit after that move.
And Gukesh now has some choices. You know, he can actually step back with that knight in the center and ask a question to the light square bishop. He can even try to harass the bishop in another way by moving the knight that's sitting on c6 and attack that bishop. But, well, he steps back with his knight, and I'm expecting Richard to preserve that bishop. That bishop is, after all, a fantastic piece, and he moves it forward. These guys, they are good. They're going after every single little advantage. Big threat of actually playing bishop takes knight and absolutely ruining the black pawn structure.
Yeah, look at the heart rate as well. Richard's had a high heart rate throughout. He's getting his workout today, 163. Gukesh, very calm player there. White can now do that damage to the pawns if he wants to, but maybe he doesn't want to rush that move. He just stabilizes his knight in the middle of the board, but more importantly, this allows the white queen to come to a very aggressive square. I like this move. The white queen wants to move in front of the white king, aiming at black's king and creating some threats. And this position has a lot of potential, but black has a good hold in the center. Pretty even at the moment, but hang a minute. I haven't even looked at the time, Jovanka. I've only just noticed that Gukesh has fallen asleep.
Well, he did just make a move there, retreating the bishop. I'm expecting this whole idea is that he wants to actually pick up the f-pawn and move it 2 squares, attack the knight in the middle of the board. Richard has to be careful because you don't want to find your knight trapped there in the middle. And yeah, Richard now pausing. He has his choice. He can continue with your plan of moving the queen. And wow.
Oh, that is such a brave move, that one.
But it's ugly. It's ugly because it leaves some holes there for the black pieces to occupy. And Richard don't care though.
He doesn't. I find sometimes the most beautiful things in life are actually ugly on the outside, and that move, it did look ugly because you open up your own king and white's pawns are doing a very weird spider-like formation there, but it is that white knight in the center which looks pretty good. I mean, it's a very strange position though, and Gukesh playing excellent at the moment. He's not giving any weaknesses away. Very classical style of play from Gukesh here.
Yeah. He's going to get ready to reroute that knight on a very long journey and try to put it on the square that has now been left wide open on f4. So Richard's heart rate gone up to 159 and the clock is ticking down. It's also not really very easy to see a way for Richard to actually conduct something, and there comes the queens. Should Gukesh go into an endgame? And Gukesh says, I'll have that.
I'm surprised by the queen exchange. I thought Richard could move the queen the other way there and try to generate something on the king side. That seemed more his style. But this queen exchange is damage limitation from Richard, I feel. Now, black should be doing a little bit better here because he has no weaknesses and white's pawns are a bit funny later on, but still seems fairly even at this moment in time. The clock situation, not in Gukesh's favor.
Yeah, I'm actually going to say that I fancy black's chances because black has a nice plan. He can put his knight in the middle. There you go, Gukesh. And that knight will eye up 2 very powerful squares. He also has the potential of kicking back the rook. And take a look at the light square bishop. That is targeting a pawn, which must be overprotected. And that's why Richard steps up with his king.
Yeah, Gukesh just playing very sensible moves here. Both sides trying to gain a bit of space, and
Richard breaking the rules, because the first thing that you're taught is when you are playing with colors of opposite bishops of opposite colors, you put your pawns on the square that is opposite to your opponent's bishop, and he's sat there and put them at the edge. And there you go.
He sacrificed a pawn, or has he just blundered a pawn there? Well, Richard is trying to get some dynamic play there by this pawn break. This is his idea. Gukesh just takes that pawn off the board, and Richard wants to try to get something going on the left-hand side of the board. I quite like this idea from Richard, because when your position's getting a little bit worse, but your opponent's short of time, you need to complicate things. And he is now trying to win his pawn back. That rook lined up against black's pawn. Black jumping in with the knight into the center of the board. I think Richard should eliminate this knight. It could get very dangerous otherwise, and I don't know. I'm kind of liking Richard's position now. I feel that his knight is a pretty good piece.
Yeah, I have to say, you know, I'm actually seeing a big turnaround in the position, and Gukesh finding a target to attack, and that's why he's concentrated his forces. But the knight can just step forward in the middle, and how are you going to rescue that rook?
But the problem is, I think black is losing. Black is winning a pawn here because the pawn in front of white's king is in a lot of trouble. How do you defend that? Maybe there's a clever way. They're both under 20 seconds now. The knight attacks the rook, and there goes that pawn. So Gukesh going a pawn up, and his rooks look very scary to me. Maybe Richard is still okay though.
Yeah, I mean, both sides with trumps there, and well, Richard winning a pawn back. And now the rook is there on the second row. I have a suspicion that this game might fizzle out after all the adventure into a draw.
It might well do. They've both now got equal material on the board. They're both very short of time. There's a lot of play left in this position. Which is better, the knight or the bishop? I prefer Richard's pawns, because if he starts pushing them, they're further away from Black's king, so the Black king will find it harder to stop them from queening. And I quite like Richard's knight in the center of the board there. If I was going to pick a color here, I'd certainly pick the white side, but are they going to repeat positions?
Yeah.
It looks very likely.
No, Richard says no. Instead, he pushes his pawns, and look at this. It is a race with both sides advancing their pawn majorities.
Indeed, and
3,
Richard
2.
just seemed... Oh, he had 1 second left with that move. Phenomenal that he managed to get that in on time. Whose pawns are going to be quicker? And this move, okay, is looking like we're going to get lots of liquidations. But Richard is actually going to go a pawn up now. So Gukesh under some pressure here. There is the pawn up with check. And can he queen that pawn, Richard? Very scary position for Gukesh, this.
Very scary. And just 5 seconds on the clock for Gukesh, and you see the way that Richard is playing, going backwards with the king. And now we're in a rook and pawn ending, and not all rook and pawn endings are drawn. And I'm expecting Richard to drop back with the rook.
Winning.
This looks like it's winning, and now he can get behind his own passed pawn. Get that rook behind the pawn.
Or he can move his king forwards as well. Both of these look good. You can support the pawn with your king, and this is an extra pawn for Richard. And he is now getting a bit greedy. He's going to win a second pawn, I think, Jovanka. This is just winning for Richard. Okay, he's not going for that pawn, but that is going to be a queen. That pawn will be a queen. It's 2 squares away from queening, and this is not going to work. Gukesh in a world of pain here.
Yeah, and there's no way that pawn can be prevented from queening.